There is no two people on your team that respond exactly the same way. You have to have the one-on-ones to develop a rapport and a trust, and you have to have the team so you can talk about clarity and process and systems.
Welcome back to the TrustBuilt Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Bennett, and today's guest, we've got Jim Robinson. Jim has a wealth of things that he does. Jim is a CEO, a founder, a speaker, a coach, and podcaster. Jim, did I get it all? Did I catch them all?
You got it all, man. I'm writing books. I got some things going on, but I do have a full schedule. I've had a full schedule. I know I only look 30. That's going to blow people's mind with all this experience I got, and I still look 30. It's kind of crazy.
Well, I have a thing for gray hair. Misery loves it all, right? So if you would take a few minutes and talk about your journey, what is the CEO, the founder, the speaker, the author? What is all that? Tell us your journey.
I started a business back in 1985, and I literally just thought I'd go in business, and it was super easy and it would be fun. And back then I had a partner, and he brought in a business coach, and her name is Mary Ellen Drummond. She's still very much around. I've tried to pull her out of retirement, by the way. She won't do it. She's in her 80s, and she was my first business coach. And I just said, this is silly. I don't need a business coach. Why would I ever need that? I'm just this business guy. I'm smart. I can figure this out. And I had her come back. The partner had her come back a second time. And I had this realization on that second visit, which was only about 6 weeks later. I had this realization that, wow, I got to have a coach. This makes perfect sense. I'm an idiot, and I'm going to figure this stuff out and be better because of it. And so the rest is history, as they say. I literally became a business coach 30 some odd years ago. I got accredited by 3 different platforms to be able to do that. I felt so inspired by having a coach that I wanted to be a better coach. I wanted to be a better teacher, a better leader. And so I started figuring out ways to do that. And I followed different folks to do that. I've written a couple of books. I have a book coming out with Chris Voss that we do a joint author thing that's coming out in April. It's called Lead with Empathy. I've been very fortunate and connected to some well-rounded people that are really smart. And I get to kind of hang out with them and use their accolades to kind of feel better about myself, I guess, is really the bottom line. But business, tenured employees, over August will be 41 years for me in business. And that's really kind of been my ride.
Yeah. You said something there. Of course, I was listening to all of it, but the one thing that hung with me that you said was lead with empathy, what you're working on. Let's dip our toe into that. Can we do that? Can we talk about empathy?
Absolutely. Let's go.
I will share with you one of the, I won't say struggles, but one of the things that I always have to get past, because my whole world is around team development. How do we get the team more engaged? How do we build a strong organization by the team? And one of the things that I always work with clients on is understanding empathy, and they typically interpret that as sympathy. So let's share with us a little bit more about an insight into what empathy might look like in the workplace.
Well, it's putting yourself in their shoes, really. It's really having their feeling like they coming in, you don't know what the problem is. But if you sit with them just for a few minutes, you will start to feel what they're actually feeling. You will, for me, that's really, I don't know, I say giftedness, if you will, and I use that very loosely, but I would sit with employees early on, of which I still have employees. I still have my very first client, by the way, and they still do business with me. It's literally because when you lead with empathy, you sit with them just for a minute, you're like, wow, that person's going through something. You will feel what they're going through. And that's a powerful opportunity to connect deeper, for one. And it's nothing to do with sympathy. You're not being sympathetic that their dog just passed away or they had to put their dog down. That's not what it is. But being empathetic because you too have had to put a dog down. You can relate to what they're going through. And so being empathetic in those cases, leading with empathy, is you emotionally connect. You feel what they feel, and it's much easier to relate and be able to lead them through those things. That's really what empathy is about.
Yeah. Yeah. Living in that moment with them, I have shown empathy because I've actually been in their situation, but you can also show empathy if you haven't, just to, like what you're saying, live in that moment. Like, I think Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, I think is the book. I think it's Brene Brown book that talks about the difference in empathy and sympathy is someone falls in the well and you're at the top of the well looking down, and sympathy is looking down going, oh, that sucks for you. Sorry that happened. And empathy is climbing down in the well and helping them get back out of it. And
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty good analogy of the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Yeah. And then really metaphorically, it's literally saying the well, and it's that emotional charge. Sympathy, we go even deeper on that side of that. If you hug somebody when they're having this emotional charge, you're anchoring a bad behavior. That's a really bad idea. We don't want to anchor bad behaviors, but we want to connect emotionally. And empathy helps us connect emotionally. And it could be simply putting the hand on the shoulder, giving, having that moment. It's literally if you sit with somebody for just 3, 4, or 5 minutes, you sit with them, you'll start to feel what they feel. And that's really, for me, that's the empathy piece. And then you become relatable. You can guide them differently in the task ahead of them for the day, the moment, the hour, the month, the week. You can lead them through that based on what you feel their connection is. You don't know what they're going through, but you can feel some of their emotions very quickly. And that, for me, that's empathy.
Yeah, you mentioned connection, but I think you were also describing compassion. Having compassion for another person is part of where empathy lives, connection and compassion. And that
Yeah.
builds trust, right?
And that will develop trust. Being able to connect to somebody that they feel you can relate to them, they will develop very quick trust. We're really intentional, and I always use my fingers to describe this, but in the first couple of weeks of onboarding a new team member, we are really intentional about the connection. Years ago, when they first came up with 401ks, they said you couldn't participate in the new 401k for 2 years. And the government decided that because there was no loyalty and people would bounce pretty quickly from a company. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So let's figure out how to create loyalty faster. And so we really got intentional. And we watched a shift at 9 months to 12 months where loyalty becomes their normalcy and they're committed to their career with our teams. So much so, we've been so intentional that we have very tenured employees, 35 years with me. And it's kind of crazy that we did that. And now 401k figured this out. They put you in the game right away. They also know financially they need to get people in the game right away. But it used to be based on how long will people stay in the company, and that was 2 years. And I just said, forget that. There's got to be a better way. And so we really made some efforts to develop loyalty, which is trust based. It's literally diminishing the fear. I always say you got faith or fear, and there's nothing in between. Born with two fears. Loud sounds are falling. The rest of them are rehearsed. They're learned behaviors. Get rid of them. They're not serving anything. Let's go, man. Let's change the game. Let's get better at everything we do. Go ahead, fear falling down. I don't care. And if I get too loud, go ahead and fear that. But everything else, that's a learned behavior. Let's get rid of that stuff. It's holding you back.
Yeah, when you started implementing this years ago, talk about the transition of trying to get this culture that you've created. Talk about it's not an easy lift to make that happen. Talk a little bit about that journey there.
So I probably have mentioned before, but so I started in 85, and by 89, I was pretty much out of business. It was a disaster. Financially, it was a disaster. I grossed $114,000, and I think I lost 30 some odd $1,000 in that very first year. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're going to be this millionaire. You haven't figured this stuff out. You're stupid. And because of that, I realized kind of the long story short here, the long story boring, if you will. My wife and I had a heated debate. We've been married 6 months longer than I've been in business, by the way. I don't know why she stayed with me. We just celebrated February 16th was 41 years. And I told her very early on, I said, if you ever tell me I'm like my father, I'm just going to get rid of you because there's more women. I'll just go get a different one. It was pretty simple to me. I was unattached. And she's like, what? What's your problem, man? And we got in one of those spousal elevated discussions. And she says, you're just like your father. And I had to sleep on that because I was just like him. But I slept on it. And the next morning, I had to go eat crow. I said, you're absolutely right. I never want you to leave. I love you dearly. You're my best friend. You're the love of my life. I don't want you to go anywhere. And I'm so sorry that I'm an idiot, but I'm going to figure this out. I was 23, and I literally had that awakening. Wow, I've been in business to serve myself. And the reality is we're in business to serve everyone else, and we'll be the last one to eat. And when I figured that out, that's when the coaches came in. That's when all of this other stuff started happening for us. And it was literally saying, enough's enough of me. I got to figure out how to serve other people. And so I transitioned our business into this better approach to where I want to serve them to be their best, and then I'll rise later by them rising. And so I had to just come up with that. And that was really my wife and I having a debate that wasn't in my favor, but it ultimately served me so I could serve many others.
Yeah, the saying that I find myself repeating, it's not really intentional, but I can't think of anything better. The analogy is it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle.
Yeah.
And that's what you just described when you said that you brought in the coaches and you started reaching out for others to help you see the path to get the results that you wanted.
Yeah.
Is that part of how you got into coaching? Is because you saw the benefit that? How did that work for you to get into coaching?
When I get Mary Ellen Drummond, when I first got her, the first time I was annoyed because I was still really a smart business guy and I had the cat by the tail and I was going to kill the cat. And it was literally, I mastered it. And then a few weeks later, she came back in. She brought a Lou Holtz video with her. And she showed this, and she would pause the video during his speech, and she would narrate what he was really coaching us on in this video. And I watched this unfold, and Lou Holtz, because I'm watching him, Notre Dame coach, if you don't know what I'm talking about, one of my all-time favorite, the biggest 90-pound man I've ever met. And I ultimately bought his video. I still own it today on VHS, by the way, big old cassette tape. And I actually have a combo TV to play his video. That changed everything for me because he says it doesn't matter what you do in life, but be the best at it. And I'm like, wow, I always thought I was just the best, but I didn't even know what I was supposed to be doing. So I had to go on a little bit different discovery there. And my mission became, I'm going to grow people very intentionally through new experiences and structured education. And by deciding that, it made me want to be a coach so I could spend time with people. I love to connect to people. I love to hear their stories. I love to give them stories. I love to watch them shift. I love to watch the discomfort to find comfort. And it was really being able to go through that journey. I'm like, wow, I got to be better at this. Mary Ellen Drummond impacted me. Lou Holtz impacted me. And now I've had hundreds that have been impactful for me. And I still pursue a higher education. I go see people all the time. And it's really for that continued growth. So I can be better and serve other people. So much so when we have these team members, I recognize that I was creating those conflicts like my wife and I had that discussion. And when I was about 22, 23, I was creating those problems in our employees and our team members. And I said, enough's enough. Let's just educate both. And so we created an education plan that we would grow the team member, but we'll also grow their significant other. In some cases, when I'm going to send them to a conference or an event, I say, I'm going to send you and I'll pay for everything, but you got to go home and convince your spouse to go with you. And they do that. And if they can't figure out how to get that done, they don't get to go. Because I want both people to grow together. Otherwise, we're growing them apart. And that's a problem. We don't want to separate couples. We want them to grow better together. And that requires us to be better, to acknowledge who we are, be self-aware. And there's an education journey to that. That started my coaching career, and that's why I do what I do today.
Yeah, you were connecting emotion to the whole experience when you bring in that significant other. That's powerful.
Yes.
And that's your support. There's going into any business, whatever kind of business you're going into, if you don't have support at home, you better be lucky, right? That the business takes off and does well and you get on the right path, because lack of support at home, whether it's your husband or wife or the kids, it all matters. And connecting that emotion, it's a powerful piece.
Yeah, if you got a bandwagoner at home, good luck. Because you're about to have a tough business, man, because they go home whining about how tough their day was, and then the bandwagoner jumps on. Oh, yeah, it was terrible. It was a terrible company. They're quitting or they're going to get fired soon because they ain't going to perform.
Yeah.
Whereas they go home and that significant other is already well connected. They're like, that's not true. They don't buy into the story just as quick. They literally put you in check, and that's really what we want to make sure we're doing. Put ourselves in check or have somebody to do that for us.
Yeah, I was working with a family transition, right? The father had the business, wanted to turn the business over to his kids. And the problem was that they didn't have a conversation about it. I found out before the kids did. He said, I want to turn this over to them, and we're going to figure out how to do it. I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to, who's going to do what? I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, what'd they say? So I haven't talked to them. You're here to help me do that. So he had built this business. He had it 35 years. And the plan was to turn it over to his kids. Kids didn't want it. They're like, we grew up with that. I'm not putting my kids through that. We're not doing that. And so the whole perception of the business and his legacy was done.
He's going hunting.
He's going yeah, you got to find solo to do.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So let's talk about speaking. You're the first one that I may have had another guest on that does speaking. Speaking is a hard thing to get into. And people have to trust, since we're talking about trust here, they have to trust that you're going to deliver something with impact. Talk about the whole getting into speaking and how do you stay in the speaking world. Talk a little bit about what speaking looks like and that journey there.
So getting into speaking, when my father was a minister growing up, and I watched him speak at the pulpit, twice on Sundays, Wednesday nights. I was at every service until I was about 15 or 16. And I just watched that, and one, it was annoying that I had to sit through those services. And I say that jokingly today, because really he gave me all these gifts about how to speak, when to speak, and why. And I wasn't paying attention to any of that. He was annoying to me at that time. I just everybody loved him. They thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I was just like, holy smokes, what am I doing? And then later at that 23 years old thing, I'm like, wow, he gave me a bunch of gifts and I haven't even figured out how to capitalize on that. Isn't that by design, by our creator? We get these things from our parents, grandparents, etc. All in totality is the things we're supposed to use to serve other people. And I had to figure that part out. And so for the speaking side of things, I think I've just mimicked what I was raised around. I literally watched it all the time. And him being engaging on stage or behind the pulpit versus how he engaged in private was the same. And so authenticity, one of my personal core values, is to just be who you are. Not everybody's going to like you or enjoy you, but the reality is it will be probably the most out of the group. And so authenticity. And so I just like to engage. And even in high school, I would be a guy that would get up and talk. And at family reunions, I'd get up and talk. Most people call me for advice or how to guide or lead them. And so I just started saying, man, I got to be able to deliver some stuff. I got to be able to get up there, and instead of coaching one-on-one, I can get the whole group. I can get 1,000 people at a time, and that I can give the same lesson to one person, or I can give it to 100 or 1,000. And so speaking for me became very natural, very easy to do. And I just enjoy that space. I think serving people, however you can get to people, I always say I'm going to watch them get uncomfortable. John Maxwell says you're looking for shiny eyes, as he calls it. He says you're watching your crowd. You get shiny eyes, they're paying attention. No shiny eyes, they could care less what you're doing. And so I'm always really intentional about that. And your endorphins go up, your dopamine goes up, and you're looking for shiny eyes in your group. It could be 20 people in the room, but you're walking around looking for that. And that really assures you that, okay, I'm reaching 5 of the 20, let's say. If you're impacting 5 people of 20, that's pretty good numbers. Keep going. So speak when you have a chance. Become that. If you're introverted, find a way to speak to the 5. If you're extroverted, find a way to speak to the 10,000. But impact as many as you can, because you have a lot of gifts and you have an obligation to give them. I say a moral and a higher calling for the greater good. You have to share those gifts.
Yeah, where I found myself living in what you just said there, we're still staying on the theme of connection. It's connecting to the audience, whether the audience is 5 or more or 1, really.
Yeah.
And having a connection. And to me, the one of the sayings I always have is communication takes place on the listener's terms, and understanding the language that they need to hear in order for the message to be delivered into land with that impact. And that's what you're describing is the connection and get the shiny eyes. I think that's great. I haven't heard that before. That's great.
Yeah.
So talk a little. Go ahead.
I was going to say your hormones change when you're engaged, and so it reflects in the eyes. And so when you can see it in somebody's eyes, you're like, okay, I'm going in. I'm gonna sit with you for a minute. I need to get you because you're going to help me connect to them other ones. And so you got to be really intentional in that. I think there's some opportunity there for sure.
And so that's same true when you're coaching, right? When you've got the eye contact and you've got the engagement, it's the same process.
Yeah.
Right.
You can, it's really about capitalizing on the ability to storytell. And when you're coaching, it's a little bit different because you're getting a little more structured. You're looking for setting goals, milestones, action items for the week, and then accountability. That's a little bit different in the coaching side of things as opposed to giving a talk. Sometimes you can get people's attention is I tell them it's the lemon story, but I'll take you to your refrigerator. So I have you close your eyes and get real somber for a minute, just real quiet and solid. And I say, let's go to your refrigerator. Can you see your refrigerator? And what is the brand? Oh, it's a General Electric. And I get them right in front of that refrigerator emotionally. And then I'm like, open that fridge. I want to talk about the lemon in the refrigerator. And I slow down. I get my cadence becomes very, very monitored, very monotone. And I talk about the lemon. And before I get back from that space, that lemon, you can taste it. And in that moment, now I have you open enough to talk to you. Now we can coach and learn through some things, but I got to get you first sometimes. Other times, as you've coached, people just show up with like an open funnel, man. Just pour into me, baby. This is my day. Load me. Other days, we're just closed. I am, you are, we all are. And so we need somebody, a coach, to open us a little bit so we can learn better. And so it takes a good coach to be able to do that. Speaking is a little bit differently. If they're paying to come and watch somebody speak, it's like going to a concert and you see Sammy Hagar on concert. You already paid. You're already in rapport with him because of your expectations. He's just going to deliver whatever he wants. And you're going to go, yeah, that's a great show, man. I love that. That's a very different thing. So giving a speech when somebody's already committed, there's a developed rapport. You've been in a lot of concert halls. You've seen a lot of people give speeches. Literally 3 people out of 5,000 are not in rapport and they usually leave. Everyone else in the room is already in rapport, so you don't have to open them. They're already connected to you at whatever you're going to deliver, and they're just geeked up, and they just think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread or Jesus made his own sandals. It's literally just an opportunity to connect. And so coaching's a little bit differently. Sometimes we have to open because we're having a moment. And so 2 different things. Give speeches, give talks, open the room, be intentional in how you do that. And then the coaching side, if you didn't, get into coaching, it's literally sometimes you got to be prepared because you're working with an executive that's super closed off and they want to go to the next level. He just don't know how to get there. You got to lead them to get there.
Let's take a pivot here and talk more about team development. A lot of the listeners that I have are business owners and they are leading teams of 5 to, I've got some that, 500, right? There's all types that listen to this podcast. And when you're talking about leading teams of people, what does that look like from a CEO founder standpoint, trying to to accomplish the same thing? Because you're still a coach, whether you're running a business or you're coaching a business owner. So talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, use that term coach, if you will, in kind of in context with leadership, if you will, even. You don't have to be certified as a coach to be the coach. You got to be the coach because you're inspiring this team to do something. And the clarity is we're going this direction. This freight train is that way. And you may have a detour because the track failed and you're going to have to go around, but we're all going that same direction. You've got to inspire that team to get on that train. And if the engine stops, you got to figure out how they're all going to push because there's sometimes that train's going to stall, that truck's going to stall. You got to keep going because you still got to get to the end zone. And so figuring out how to lead the team, there is no 2 people on your team that respond exactly the same way. You have to have the one-on-ones to develop a rapport and a trust, and you have to have the team so you can talk about clarity and process and systems. At least that's how I do it. That's how our teams do it. That's how my directors do it, my VPs. They do that same thing. I always say the greatest success story is somebody speaking in your tone and in your cadence. And to watch it, it's almost annoying because you're like, holy mackerel, that dude's saying exactly what I say. Man, this is freaking crazy. But seeing that happen is really powerful in a business standpoint because it means everybody really is going in the same direction. And that phrase or that terminology, that phraseology, if you will, is really the cadence for the business. So developing the teams, meet one-on-one, make sure they're validated, make sure their opinions matter. Some of it may be needed to be implemented right away, so they are validated. Some of it needs to be said, I'm going to table that for now, but I love the idea. Let's talk about it 2 months from now, next quarter. But get all of that and validate them individually, recognize them publicly. That's really important. You'll develop teams that'll blow your mind because people want to connect. They want to be connected to, and they want to be able to share. And so being able to connect to them on individual basis and then in group. Typically a good group in a business is in the 10 to 12 spot. If you have C-suite, you're talking 3 or 4 direct reports. Beyond that is director levels, high-level management. That could be 14 to 16 maybe. But there's very specific numbers that work really well from a management direct connection type standpoint. Lead your teams individually and then by group.
You mentioned, and I want to wrap it up here, but you mentioned validating, right? People want to be seen, heard, letting them share. And so that to me, once a business owner does that, that's where the real impact, they listen. They're looking for alignment then instead of arm wrestling the strategy or the alignment. Tell us a little bit, and I do want to wrap this up a little bit here, but let's talk a little bit about when your team finally feels heard, they feel seen, they feel validated that they matter. What does that look like when you have a team of that?
So a few years ago, I tell this story a little bit. A guy named Danny that was working for us, he came to me one day and he says, I just now realized that I can talk to you just like I talk to everyone else. And I'm like, whoa, we developed some trust and some comfort real quick. That was really an awesome day for me. And that was only maybe 18, 20 years ago. And I realized that I wasn't capitalizing enough on them contributing in the group session. And so we were intentional on this. We made everybody in any of our meetings a trainer for a specific led topic by me or a director or a VP. So we got really intentional. We said, how about explaining IVRs? Johnny, tell the group about how to best use an IVR. And they would start explaining. And I'm like, that's awesome. Now we had the opportunity to recognize, validate what their opinions were, how they coached, how they taught. And then they're welcomed and everybody, gives them the boom. We just built an introvert into an extrovert so they could teach, grow, and explain things. And we are super intentional with our groups today. And we meet, I just had meetings all morning, actually, all regional teams. I get to meet with them once a month. And I get 30 minutes with them. I ask their opinions. What do they need? How can I best serve you? What's the strength? What's the weakness? What's missing or broken? And then how do we contribute? And then I take a copious list. I send out to them by tomorrow. And I tell them, thank you for your contribution. You're impacting lives beyond what you believe. And that is really validating who they are. And they all become trainers of the same thing we train them on. And so for me, that building teams that way, I get really geeked up. You can probably tell I'm getting geeked up over this. It's literally, I feel super cool about it because they become their best selves in those moments. So help them all become trainers so they will speak comfortably. And they know I put pants on the same way they do. And when he said, I can talk to you just like I would anyone else, we just won. We good. He knows I'm the CEO. That doesn't matter when it comes to training and learning. The process is that way. I got to follow it. You got to follow it.
Well, this has been a textbook on what purpose looks like in an organization. So for anybody that wasn't listening, rewind this about 6 minutes, catch this last part. But that is textbook helping a group or an organization understand purpose and why they matter.
Yeah.
So that you sharing that with us. So for the listeners that want to track you down or they're wanting to learn more about what you do, how do they find you?
So the easiest way to do that, I guess, would be my website. Just go to Jim, just email me, jim@cgpconstruction.com, or you can go to our website, www.cgpconstruction.com. You can find us. You Google Jim Robinson, you're going to find me hanging out on the web somewhere. Yeah. Some picture of me is going to be posted somewhere. It could be the post office, guys. Be careful. Might be hanging in the post office, but you're going to find me somewhere. Hunt me down. But cgpconstruction.com, that's a big company. That's an easy way to find me and track me down.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Yeah,
today.
great to be here. Thanks very much for the questions and the time today.
You bet.